Good afternoon, class. How have you been? I hope all of you are doing well. I hope all of you are keeping safe, and I hope all these problems that we had discussed in the previous classes, that the problems you are facing because of the COVID pandemic, are also in a way manageable now, because we had discussed some ways in which you can work on them. I hope you have been doing those, and those strategies that we discussed would be working in some way or the other. Okay, so in the last class, I had also told you to think about genres of fiction. Genres, in the sense, if you think very vastly about it, there are numerous genres of fiction nowadays. Uh, you can divide fiction into categories on the basis of the content they describe, the length they employ, and the kind of structures that they employ. So, on what basis you divide them into genres determines how many genres you can come up with. You can have scientific fiction, you can have fan fiction, you can have adult fiction, you can have romance fiction, you can have motivational fiction. So, if you think about the content aspect, you can have as many divisions as possible for genres. But technically, when we speak about from the perspective of a writer, these kinds of categorizations do matter. He might decide what kind of content I want to discuss, what kind of content I want to write about. But technically, as we see in this book by David Morley, Introduction to Creative Writing, we do categorize genres according to the length that they employ. So, in that book, which I had asked you to read in the last class, there is a very brief discussion, very interesting discussion about literary genres, and it begins with flash fiction. Flash fiction. So, within flash fiction itself, there are minor subdivisions. So, flash fiction, as the name itself suggests, is probably the shortest form of fiction writing that we see today. Nowadays, writing on social media platforms, on blogs, on Facebook, or on even like very micro writing platforms like Tumblr or Pinterest or Twitter is very popular. So, according to these new medium, very long content may not be that interesting to people. So, many writers are coming up with very brief content, brief yet very impressive and very deep content these days. So, all that can come under flash fiction. According to the text, anything that is between 250 to 1000 words can come under the category flash fiction, which is slightly below the length of short stories. But nowadays, when we look at the internet, there are people who tell stories within one or two sentences even. So even that can be seen as a subgenre of flash fiction. It's called nano fiction or micro fiction. Nano fiction or micro fiction. So what happens when you have very small form to discuss a story? The kind of limitations that you have, how does it determine your writing? When you have a very short scope to write something, so lesser space to write something, how will you work on that? Many things will have to be implied. Now, we may not define the character, we may not allow the character to grow, or we may not allow an environment to be familiarized, but rather many of these things will be implied rather than directly mentioned. Through one dialogue, or through the choice of words, or through something that a character does, many other things like the background, the age, or the story behind would be implied. I sort of tried to come up with a very brief example of a haiku, like very micro kind of a tale. For example, the bell rang, it must be father. He must have come after work. Meena ran to the door and opened the door. It was a hawker. It was a fruit seller, or somebody like that. Okay. She had forgotten that father will not come again. So this actually makes up a story. Now a child is waiting for her father. She expects the person on the door to be her father, and when she goes, she's reminded that father will not be coming any longer. So many of the things here is suggested. We are not told the age of the child, but we have an image of how old that woman could be. Each reader would have a different image, and we are not never told that whether the father has passed away or whether the father has left the mother and the child, or we are never even told whether there is a mother involved in the story. So many of the things are implied in a shorter form of fiction. Even the kind of emotions that the child goes through. There are not many words that convey this, but somehow we do get the emotion, right? We do get the perplexity of the emotion despite it being such a short form. So many other things will be implied rather than directly suggested in shorter forms of fiction, like the flash fiction, microfiction, and nano fiction. And when it comes to short story, you have a bit more of a scope to introduce a character, to develop. Even nano tales actually have a beginning, middle, and end. Most of it is implied, so it has a central theme, it has a central plot, but it is conveyed in very limited number of words. When it comes to short story, there is a bit more of scope. According to the text, it's around how many words? 7,500 to 20,000 words, which is considered a short story. In this case, short story does have a bit more scope than these smaller forms of fiction, where you can introduce a character, maybe a bit of their background also. So coming to the case of a short story, the scope is a bit more, but even then, most of the time there is only one incident which can be the central concern of a short story, or one theme that can be the central concern of a short story because of its length. So even then, there is a bit more scope for character development, a clearer sense of beginning, middle, and end, and a confusing or a conflict, and then its resolution. So in a short story, there is a bit more of scope. When it comes to the next form, it's a novella. Almost in between a novel and a short story. Around, you can say, 50 to 100 pages. It can be called a novella. So it has a bit more scope than a short story, slightly lesser than a novel. Even there also, there is a bit more scope of introducing certain settings, certain environments, certain conflicts, probably one or two or three, or a bit more of conflicts and their resolution, and a bit more of characters. Microfiction cannot involve that many characters. Short story may be able to involve a bit more characters. Novella can involve a bit more. And eventually we have the most significant and most popular form of fiction writing, which is the novel. The scope of a novel is vast, and the diversity with which you can write a novel is also very vast. There are many ideas you can incorporate, many settings you can incorporate, many plots and subplots that you can incorporate, and there are many hybrid modes of novel writing that are very popular these days, where there is metafiction, fiction within fiction, a writer writing about the process of writing fiction. So novel is such a form where you can actually have much action and much thought put into it. Now when you write a story, you're not just writing about a plot, a character did this or a character did that, but you're also writing about what they feel, what they could be thinking, what could be their mental states, or why would they have taken a decision this way, how would that decision have affected them. Many such emotional interior questions are worked in a novel or in any form of fiction. So always know that this is about human emotions, and this is about how people deal with life, people experience life, people think about life. So this is a very fun thing to do, writing fiction. So I'm very sure that these genres are easy for easy classification, but when you write, I'm very sure that you will find your flow. You will find what genre suits you well, what form suits you well, and what style of writing suits you well. So you can start writing actually. I have a plan for our class. I want all of you to come up with a very brief story or some form of writing. The length of it you can decide. You come up with some form of writing, fiction. It can be slightly poetic, but somehow it should be fiction. Uh, we'll try to bring out a book by the end of the course. By the end of the course, we'll compile all these works and try to bring out a work of fiction by our class, by FE5. So we'll do that. Now that I'm your tutor, probably this is something that we can do together as a wonderful experience, because many of us are sitting at homes a bit frustrated that we don't have anything to do. So if you can do this, if you can compile it, I will assure that it comes out. It comes out as a collective book. So can we do that? Can we think of that? Think of that and let me know, and we'll do it together. A work of fiction, small or big or larger fictions compiled from our class. Can we do that? We'll do that then. So let me know and we'll decide. For the time being, I'm closing the class. In the next class, we'll discuss further. Thank you. Stay safe, wear a mask, wash your hands with soap frequently. Thank you.